According to the United Nations organization, in 2023, India became the most populous country in the world. Can you guess what place the United States of America holds in this ranking? It's third. And in terms of size, the United States ranks fourth, occupying about 6% of the land. There's plenty of room for the 340 million people who live there. There's enough space, and there's no need to live in one region. The population of the United States is distributed quite unevenly. Let's draw a line straight through the middle of the country, from North Dakota to Texas. Studying census data revealed an interesting fact. 80% of the US population lives to the east of this imaginary line, while the remaining 20% live to the west. That's just every fifth American. We're talking about major metropolitan areas like Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. If you don't believe it, just look at a satellite map of the United States at night. The right side, the eastern coast, is brighter. But why did such a huge population imbalance occur? It's all about history and geography. The eastern coast is where the United States gained independence in 1776, from where the first settlers began to spread westward. One important milestone was the Louisiana Purchase. Today, this region mostly represents the Midwest and fits well into the Mississippi watershed. This means there's a lot of fertile soil here, ideal for agriculture. But does this automatically mean a population boom? The demographic situation in the US shows that the majority of citizens live either on the east or west coast, leaving a large swath of land in the center of the country practically empty. People know it as the empty belt of America. This territory stretches from the Canadian border in the north to Mexico in the south. The total area of this strip of land is 900,000 square kilometers, which is twice the size of California, a huge piece of land. In fact, this narrow strip accounts for 12% of the entire territory of the United States. The United States without Alaska and Hawaii, a belt runs from north to south through 7 states, but its population accounts for only 1% of the total population of the United States. But that doesn't mean the area is completely empty. There are still just over 3 million people living here, which is roughly the population of the island country of Jamaica, but there is room for many more people. Let's take Nigeria in West Africa. Its total area is slightly larger than the sparsely populated belt in America, but Nigeria's population is a huge 206 million people, making it the 7th most populous country on the planet. Impressive, isn't it? But why doesn't the American Midwest realize its potential? It's time for one final history lesson. We've already discussed how the United States expanded from the East Coast to the West Coast, but that doesn't mean the West was far behind. Take the cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles, for example. They were incorporated in 1850, just 13 years after Chicago, and the following year, Portland, Oregon, was incorporated. In general, you get the idea. And in 1869, the United States completed the construction of its first transcontinental railroad. From a transportation standpoint, the country was unified. There's no single compelling historical reason to explain why so few people live in the center of the country. It's time to learn a little interesting geography. If you look at a physical map of the United States, you'll notice that this belt lies on the Great Plains. As the name suggests, the terrain here is flat, which should be ideal for large settlements. But in reality, it's not the case. To the east of this region is a huge brown spot covering it. Mountains, but not just any mountains. They're the Rocky Mountains. The mountain range is about 76 million years old and has several peaks over 4,200 meters high. And most importantly, this ridge plays an important role in shaping the climate of the region. Ever heard of the rain shadow effect? Let me explain. Moist weather systems form over the Pacific Ocean, then move eastward where they encounter the Rocky Mountains. The air rises over the mountains where it cools and condenses. As a result, there's a lot of rain and snow for people living to the west and east of the mountain range, but just a few drops to the east of it. When the air from the Pacific Ocean finally reaches the Great Plains, it no longer contains much moisture. Essentially, the weather system starts to take moisture from the surrounding landscape. This creates a dry climate to the east of the Rocky Mountains. This belt is home to so few Americans, it is one of the driest parts of the country. So when in the 19th century settlers came here, they just continued westward. Besides, in California, there was a gold rush that they sought. The climate in this part of the plains is not very suitable for agriculture, and huge temperature fluctuations also do not contribute to this. In one day, the temperature can drop from 20 to -1 degree Celsius and from 68 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, respectively. It's like walking into a room with an air conditioner on a hot summer day isn't the most pleasant feeling in Southern California. The same dry climate, nevertheless, is home to about 40 million people, making California the most densely populated state in the USA. What's its secret? A vast network of irrigation canals and aqueducts, as well as a share of water from the Colorado River. Summer on the Great Plains can be very hot, and winter very cold. The reason for such wild weather conditions is polar winds. They blow along the Rocky Mountains and then quickly descend onto the plains. A winter day in Wyoming, for example, can start pleasantly warm, but later, in the second half of the day, the temperature can easily drop below zero. You simply won't know how to dress, and most likely won't want to move here. That's what 99% of Americans think. People like to feel comfortable, so we prefer to live in moderate climate zones, in places where it's neither too cold nor too hot. There's not a lot of population. Just look at the driest inhabited continent. You guessed it. It's Australia. Almost 70% of the country's territory is arid or semi-arid, a polite way of saying it's a desert. That's why Australians cluster in coastal areas. 90% of them live in major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth. The only exception is the capital Canberra, built inland near a water source. But the inland regions of Australia are sparsely populated, like in the States. On an area the size of 12 Lake Michigans, there's only one major city. Greetings to the residents of Alice Springs. They really live in an oasis. And what about places with a moderate climate, like Europe, where the population is evenly distributed, and yes and no, depending on the country? In Germany, 77% of people live in cities. They have many major cities to choose from. Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, and Cologne have over 1 million people. But let's look at neighboring France. How many cities with a population over 1 million can you name? Of course, Paris, with over 12 million people. But now the staggering fact, the next two cities on the list, Lyon and Marseille, have a population barely over 2 million each, respectively. Notice the huge imbalance? That's how it is in most major European countries. In Greece, for example, 35% of the population lives in the capital Athens. Thus, the sparsely populated center of the USA is not a unique example. America is the land of opportunities, but the chances of finding a better life are higher in big cities, in the country's largest metropolises, at least a quarter of the gross domestic product, and most of them are located on the east and west coasts, in the sparsely populated belt of America. There's not a single city with a population over 1 million people.